The 32nd Guam Youth Congress is hereby called to order. I would now like to call on Majority Leader Alabang for the prayer. Please stand.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, help us make good decisions today and guide us to decisions we're going to make today to make our island better and to progress as a society. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Labang. I would now like to call on Representative Felicen for the national anthem.
Oh, say, can
And now call on Representative Lorenzo for the Guam hymn.
Fanogi chamoru put
And now call on Representative Elijah Santos for the Union Fresi.
Ini fresi, ginin imastakilu, gihinasoku, imastakilum, ikorasonhu, zanimas figu naninya senyahu, hu fresin maisazu, para bahu protehi, zanhu defendi, i hinengi, i kotura, i lengwahi, i airi, i hanum, zanitanu gitsamoru. Niren shaku de letsu ginazos tata, estu fitma gihilui bipnia, zani banderahu, i banderan guahan.
Thank you all. Please be seated. Mr. Recording Secretary, roll call, please.
Representative Noel Brandon Negracia, Representative Lauren Dinsman, Representative Abel Isaiah Duenas, Representative Davin Felicen, Representative Prairie Garrido, Representative Al Edrich Labang, Representative Stephanie Lorenzo, Representative Jewel Amber Maige, Representative Valina Matanani, Representative Janae Pareda, Representative Zachary Pierre Paul, Representative DeMarco Kineni, Representative Tristan Quintanilla, Representative Jacob Richards, Representative Elijah Santos, Representative Javen Santos, Representative Vicente Blas Tyron, Representative Kyla Ann Trinidad, Representative Christian Valencia, Representative Isabel Valencia. Mr. Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're now on item 7, call for the approval of the Legislative Journal. Majority Leader Labang, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to approve Legislative Journal dated September 7, 2019.
There's been a motion to approve Legislative Journal dated September 7, 2019. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive items 8 and 9 of the session agenda.
There's been a motion to waive items 8 and 9 of our legislative session agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I have a report from the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs. The committee report for Bill 28-32 has been sent to all members for their review. Now I can make a motion to move. Mr. Speaker, I move to waive items 11 of the session agenda.
Before we do that, are there any other reports from other standing committees? Seeing as there are none, we'll move on. Mr. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I waive item 11 of the session agenda.
There's been a motion to waive item 11 of the session agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we give all bills and resolution on this session agenda be deemed first read.
There's been a motion that all bills and resolutions on our session agenda be to have deemed to have their first reading. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive items 14 and 15 of the session agenda.
There's been a motion to waive items 14 and 15 of our legislative session agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're now in motions. Any member who wishes to be recognized? Representative Santos, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill number 27-32 in third reading file.
There has been a motion to place Bill number 27-32 into the third reading file for discussion. Are there any objections? 27-32. It's already in the second reading. There's been a motion to place Bill number 27-32 onto the third reading file to be discussed. Are there any objections? There's been an objection. All those in favor of placing Bill number 27-32 onto the third reading file for discussion, are there any objections? Please raise your hand. Colleagues, this is just procedural. It's going to be in the third reading for discussion, and then after that it will be moved to the voting file. Got it? Okay. Please speak on the mic. You're recognized, Representative DeMarco.
Isn't the second reading file for debate and discussion, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, it's currently in the second reading file.
But he's trying
and then
to
you
move it to the
it to the third reading file to be discussed.
I thought we move it to the second
And then
reading
you
file
move it
to be
to the-
discussed.
We're in recess. Uh, 32nd Guam Youth Congress is back in session. Representative Santos, I believe you have an amendment to your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I apologize for the confusion. I'll amend my motion to read, move Bill 27-32 to the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 27-32 onto the second reading file for discussion. Are there any objections? Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank my colleagues for the opportunity to speak on Bill 27-32, as well as thank the Committee on Land and Environment for engaging me in the discussion of why this bill is so important in order to help to, well, I guess I'll start, Mr. Speaker, by saying that this bill has several different purposes. There's the business aspect of the bill, and there's the environmental aspect of the bill. The business aspect of the bill would be that the way that the law reads in terms of mandatory parking requirements, and just to give a little bit of background, all buildings or under law are required to give a minimum amount of parking for the in order to be compliant with the law. And we can see the aftermath of policies that are very car friendly because of the policies such as the mandatory minimum parking, where on the island of Guam, owning a car is almost it's necessary in order to live in our island. It's in order to thrive in our economy. And owning a car is not only has a huge economic burden for many low-income people in order to receive, it also has a huge environmental impact. You know, with the discussion over the past few weeks about the PUC's new power plant in order to prevent the spreading of even more fossil fuels, a lot of people tend to forget that the cars on Guam that almost everyone has a car, and there's certain differing amounts of data depending on where you read, but according to some lists, Guam is 13th highest in the world in terms of cars per capita. But some some estimates state that there are more cars registered on island than there are people on island. So to talk about the mandatory minimum parking requirements, this is just one step in making Guam more walkable, more environmentally friendly, and even more friendlier to businesses. So the environmental component is twofold. With the removal of mandatory minimum parking requirements, you make Guam more walkable. Guam has huge parking lots, and these parking lots have become a barrier to many of us walking from place to place every day because, it's driving too far. I might as well just park on the other side or just drive, even though it's like, it's just like 100 feet down the road. And I'm guilty of it, and I know many people on our island are guilty of that as well. So by removing mandatory parking requirements and allowing businesses to develop in a way that's more walkable, you reduce the carbon footprint from the amount of driving. And the second component of the environmental impact is that when we have to pave over fauna, our plant life on Guam, when we have to pave over flora or our plant life on Guam, we take away from the beauty and the environmental natural health of our island. Instead of building concrete slabs over our native plant life, we can move on to using this land, if not for development and not for making things more walkable, then we can move on to developing our developing parks with more plant life, so that way we preserve our plant life and we bring to the forefront for everyone to see the beauty of the plants that we have on Guam without paving over them. And by repealing the mandatory parking requirements, we allow businesses to make the choice of whether or not to, we allow businesses to make the choice of whether or not having parking at all is even right for them, and they get the choice to choose how much parking is good for them instead of it being mandated under law. And having businesses be able to control the parking that works for them, because there are times when we see huge parking lots that are empty, and these parking lots are only put in place because of requirements under this law. And if the businesses had the option, instead of having to build several story tall parking garages, to say, hey, we can use this land to stimulate our economy by opening up different parts of our business or opening up new parts of our business, we are able to push our economy further without the barrier of mandatory parking. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to remove the mandatory parking requirements because I believe that Guam could be greener with more plant life, and I believe that Guam could be more walkable with development on Guam in the way that is sustainable for them. I believe that Guam could be more eco-friendly by not always adhering to the comforts that many people are comfortable with in terms of their cars being a necessity. And if we make cars less convenient, then they become less of a necessity. And that requires the people of Guam to create new solutions in order to fulfill that requirement. And if we're finding new solutions instead of cars, which have a huge carbon footprint, even for our small island, we become more cognizant of our carbon emissions and lower our impact on climate change, which is affecting many of the other islands in our, many of our fellow neighbors, communities. Lastly, I see this bill as being more business friendly, allowing businesses to use the real estate that they already have in parking if they so choose in order to develop more to their business, to develop more more shops or more hotel rooms, and these are the kind of things that can help fuel our economy even further and provide for new jobs if only the businesses on Guam are given the access to. And lastly, I would like to close by saying, Mr. Speaker, this bill does not, if this bill were to pass, the parking that already is in place does not go away all at once. Rather, this bill is to give businesses the flexibility in the future once they develop to develop in a way that they feel that's right for them. When with this mandatory parking requirements, we will always be adhering to the automobile industry, which, as we're seeing nowadays, is contributing more and more to our carbon footprint and by, in that manner, climate change. So I hope that if my colleagues have any questions, I'll be free to answer them, but I hope that the body recognizes that in order to change our carbon footprint and in order to let the businesses decide what's right for them, removing the mandatory parking requirements can be better for our environment and better for our economy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Javen Santos. On the main motion, any other member wish to speak? Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to raise this a little. Regarding Bill 27-32, I'm not advocating, of course, for more cars, more parking, or anything. But as an island on Guam, as someone who's lived in Mauricio before, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how am I going to get from Mauricio to Agana if there's no place for me to park in Agana. And where, I understand the concept of this bill is to reduce our carbon footprint, to encourage, to encourage the green around us, to encourage, walking, a healthy lifestyle. I applaud that. But there is, sometimes it's really not an inconvenience because on this island, people rely on cars, to get to their job, to get from point A to point B. And, when they get to a place, they expect to be able to park their car and go into a certain place and come back out where their car's still there, not towed because they had to park on the side of the street. With the mandatory minimum parking laws, these laws were written so that businesses and places would have a place to store, I guess, the automobiles that would be around in the area. And to say we're not going to have a minimum parking requirement, these businesses can then say, okay, then what do we need a parking lot for? What do we need parking for? And that then might create congestion of traffic in the area near the business, which might cause, make it more accident prone. I'm not saying I'm against Bill 27. I'm saying there's reasonable concerns of why we would be removing the minimum parking requirement, because that's what it is right now. It's a minimum. We should be encouraging places to put your bikes. We should be encouraging people to, if you can walk somewhere or if you can get there by bike, you should try to do that, to lessen your carbon footprint. But to take away the minimum parking requirement for businesses and establishments here on Guam, yes, you can use the land for something else, but at the same time, how are you going to get these new, if you're going to bring in new business, how are you going to how are these new customers going to get to your business if 85% of them are going to come in by automobile or come in by, carpool? And if the transit system on Guam worked, then I would be, yes, this is something we can wholeheartedly pursue right now. But we do not have a working regional transit system. We do not have any other sustainable option for getting around this island right now that doesn't involve people buying a car and getting around. And especially from most of my peers and relatives down south, owning a car is the difference between making money and staying at home in the village and waiting for someone to bring you somewhere. Even my grandma down in Mauricio, she's very dependent between me and my family for someone to bring her somewhere because Mauricio's far. And, the only way for her to get to her dialysis is for someone to drive her. And the other day, I was at her dialysis clinic, and there's no place to park. Her appointment starts at 2:30. I guess the minimum parking for the area was set already, and I drove around for 15, 20 minutes trying to find a place to park so I can bring my grandma in for her medical procedure. And I can't see how that, at least one of those few instances I just mentioned now, how that's going to be alleviated by removing the mandatory minimum parking here on Guam, because there's already parking issues here on Guam. And we have the military buildup to contend with, which is 5,000 more people being moved to Guam. So removing the parking minimum will, to me, sounds like it's about to create more problems and issues it's about to solve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Any other member wish to speak on the main motion? Vice Speaker Richards, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Kennedy brought up some good points, but I also understand that ultimately it'll be left up to business owners and landowners to decide if they're going to put ample parking space or not. But I do have a question for the author, if he will yield.
Do you yield, Representative Javen Santos? You may continue, Vice Speaker.
Not a technical question, more of a personal, moral question. As far as dwellings go, let's say an apartment building, an already established apartment building, if we remove the minimum parking requirement and the landlord decides to build another story on top of the established building and not have to expand the parking, and I'm already a current resident of that building, there's going to be more people parking there. What if I come home one day and I don't have a place to park? I'm going to be frustrated for sure. I can't petition the landlord to expand the parking space if he doesn't want to. So what would you suggest be the solution for that situation?
Well, in terms of the parking, I think that my whole point of this bill is to allow businesses to not be stifled by a minimum mandatory parking requirement. So in that sense, it is to the discretion of the business owner what would be the best for their tenants. And when you come up with your leasing agreements, many people who live in apartments, a part of their leasing agreement is having a parking space that's there for themselves. So taking away the mandatory minimum parking requirement wouldn't take away the agreement that you have between your landlord in terms of the benefits that you get from signing the lease with them. So to me, I would say that because many leases that we have on Guam right now, parking is a part of their lease. And that's not to say that parking being a part of leases will go away if we remove this automobile parking space, because the landlord themselves will know that the people that are living in their uh, apartments are going to need cars, but we can't assume that everyone is going to need cars. You know, we can't assume that, oh, maybe someone in my neighborhood works someplace that's walkable, or maybe someone in my apartments works someplace that's walkable, and they don't need this parking space. So, you know, it can be negotiated with your landlord, but if they expand and if they expand and you sign a lease and you need a parking, that should be a part of your leasing agreement. But you know, I just want to say that if you can negotiate this with your landlord, there has to be a way to do it in a way, because yeah, just I would say that the assumption that there might not be enough parking is assuming that everyone in your dwelling is using one automobile parking space for each dwelling unit. So who's to say that there won't be enough parking if it was expanded for you? And to that I would say, if you do need a parking, it would be to the discretion of you and your landlord. And I don't necessarily think that those parking agreements that you have with your landlord will go away just because we remove this. Because, you know, it's better for their business as a landlord to offer the parking that you need in your leasing agreement.
Vice Speaker Richards, does that answer your question?
I'm not sure that it does, because the agreeing to or having a parking agreement in the lease says that what's there now when you sign the agreement is what's going to be there. But if you expand into an additional story and bring in more tenants and not expand the parking, then that, in a sense, voids the agreement, because people come in. I think it's safe to say at this point in time, we can assume that everyone owns a vehicle who's going to stay in a multi-person dwelling building, right? So we're not at that point yet where we can assume or even hope to assume that someone's just going to walk to work. I'd like to get there one day, sure, but I think this is a little premature to be removing this part of the law.
Mr. Speaker, he did say that he's not sure if that answered the question. Did you need more explanation on my part?
Well, if you can clarify a little further on the points that I brought up. Yeah.
Are you posing a question to the author?
If you can answer.
To me.
Continue. Yes,
To him.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I understand your concerns with the parking of the new tenants, but what I was trying to make the point of in terms of your leasing agreement, if you already lived in the building and you already had a lease agreement that you have one parking spot for yourself, and from my experience with the understanding of several apartments, this parking is assigned to you. So the people in the new building, if they were to add a new floor and they didn't expand the parking, then it's those people in the new building, if they don't have enough parking for them, and those people and those tenants would need parking, then that's bad business practice on their part. You know, ending a minimum does not mean that people aren't still going to expand. And I recognize that fact in my pushing of this bill, because, you know, there are still circumstances because of that. But if you're the person that's living in the building already, and you have an assigned parking spot, then your assigned parking spot doesn't go away because a new floor has been put above you. But if you are moving into that new place and you're trying to sign a lease agreement, and the landowner doesn't have a parking spot assigned for you, then I would say if you're looking at that lease and they don't have parking and you need that, then it should be good business practice for them to create the parking. Removing the parking requirement doesn't take away the economic factors that will create the need for parking in the first place. So if they need to expand the parking, they will. And this is not a restriction on parking, it's just a removing of mandatory requirements. But the economic factors that will play into developing new parking will still take effect, and that's one of the economic factors. It's the demand for parking from your tenants.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes, I think it does. But that being said, I would just like to bring up that the goal of a business is to make money. And by removing this requirement, it allows business owners to save money by not being required to expand their parking and yet allowing them to expand their business. And it's up to their discretion, like you said, the parking, right? They can make a new agreement and reassign, make parking open to whoever, first come, first serve. And I think you offer a valid answer that it will be up to the business owner, but I'm thinking more about the person living in the building. If the business owner doesn't want to budge and there's no additional parking made, then ultimately I'm going to get frustrated and I'm going to have to be displaced because I'm not satisfied with where I am. And I don't think that's fair in general. But that being said, I would like to propose an amendment to unstrike item A on page 3.
Would you like to speak on the amendment?
I believe that was enough speaking for me.
Okay. On the amendment by Vice Speaker Richards, any other member who wish to be recognized? It is to unstrike item A of section 61531. Unstrike A for dwellings, at least one automobile parking space for each dwelling unit. Is that correct? Any member who wish to be recognized? Representative Dinsman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am in full support of this actual amendment for unstriking A. Coming from the position of a real estate appraiser's daughter, I grew up going to these properties and seeing these dwellings. And even though one dwelling is sometimes not adequate enough for families moving into these dwellings, one, I believe, would be at least mandatory. Because in these dwellings, like say PM Marine, there's at least 14 floors in PM Marine with at least anywhere from 13 to 14, maybe 15 rooms or apartments per floor. If there's not enough adequate parking, then that would make it very hindersome on the business owners of the property. So I am in full support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dinsman. Any other member wish to be recognized on the amendment, the Richards amendment? If none, Vice Speaker Richards, you're invited to close on the amendment.
I just want to say that I think eventually crossing out item A will be a good thing to promote walking and using public transportation, but until we establish, the grounds for that by establishing good public transportation or providing incentives for walking to places, then I think leaving this stipulation will be safe for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Richards. On the amendment, on the Richards amendment, all those in favor, please. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. Vice Speaker Richards, you still have the floor.
Nothing further, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Richards. Any other member who wish to be recognized? Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
I would like to pose a question to the main author if he would yield.
Representative Kennedy, you have already spoken, so this is out of order.
Aren't I allowed to pose questions though? Not in my time?
No. Yeah. Any other member who wish to be recognized on the main motion? Seeing as there are none, Representative Javen Santos, you're invited to close.
I'd like to thank my colleagues for the discussion, and I'd like to thank Representative Richards for the amendment. I would just like to say that, in conclusion, I would like to acknowledge the fact that removing the mandatory parking requirements would not get rid of any parking today, and it would not prevent any parking further from being developed. It just allows the businesses and the market to control the parking based on demand. And that's why we don't have a maximum parking requirement, because we know that the economic factors that play a role in the businesses deciding what parking they have will be what's best for them. I would also like to say that part of the bill comes from the fact that businesses know their customer base. So I have seen many times, yes, we do see several full parkings, and it does depend on the type of business themselves, but this bill does not intend to get rid of those parkings that are full. Rather, it allows businesses that have empty lots just sitting there to have a little bit more flexibility in a way that can help stimulate our economy or help to preserve our environment in order to, by establishing more green space in their area. This bill, by proposing this bill, I do also recognize that cars will still exist. The intention of this bill ultimately is to encourage further development somewhere down the line where cars are not as mandatory. So this bill sees a future where new development is built in a way that's walkable. And I do recognize Representative Richards, Vice Speaker Richards' concern about the parking if the landlord is currently developing. And I understand the intentions of the amendment, because one, parking, especially with Representative Dinsman's pointing out the fact that for some people living in their dwelling, one parking space is not enough. But having one parking space as a compromise is, I think, is a reasonable solution. My only concern would be that in the future, when completely new parkings or new apartments are developed in a way that still has to adhere to the one parking per dwelling requirement, this will decrease the walkability. By amending the mandatory parking requirement, by amending the minimum parking requirement, the intention is to develop new neighborhoods that don't need the cars on the streets. The intention is to develop places on Guam in a way where you can have an apartment with your grocery store walkable, and you can have an apartment with your workplace walkable. Just for a little comparison, in many of the cities across the states, one of the benefits that they give to that businesses give to their employers is public transportation benefits. But on Guam, in several capacities that I've worked, the benefits that they're given is not public transportation benefits, but rather it's gas cards. And those free gas cards that we're giving to our employers contribute to the carbon footprint that we have on this island. So yeah, in conclusion, I hope that with the compromise of the amendment that has faced, we can develop our future developments on Guam in a way that's more walkable, more environmentally friendly, and can help the future residents on Guam from minimizing the carbon footprint, because I do recognize that now there are so many institutional barriers. This bill seeks to see a future where those barriers are not as prevalent, and I know that, and I understand the concerns that were made through the amendments, and I thank the colleagues for despite their concerns, being able to recognize that the bill itself as a whole still has other other beneficial parts of the other beneficial parts that should not be dismantled in order for the bill to be go to the voting file. And with that being said, Mr. Speaker, I will move Bill 27-32 to the voting file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 27-32 into the third reading file or voting file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are still in motions. Any member who wishes to be recognized? Representative Javen Santos, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Bill 28-32 on the second reading file for discussion.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 28-32 into the second reading file for discussions. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill 27-32 is an act that, or Bill, thank you. Bill 28-32 is an act to be cited as the Club for Credit Program Act of 2019. And this is a bill that I have worked on for several different terms, amending it and improving it in various different capacities. The intention of this bill is to recognize that clubs, organizations, and community organizations have a role, have an educational component for the students to benefit from. A lot of times people don't see benefit of joining clubs, so a lot of times people don't. But by not joining clubs, they don't realize that they're missing out on exploring different interests that can turn into potential career opportunities or potential lifelong skills that can benefit them in the future. The Club for Credit Act seeks to encourage participation in clubs by recognizing the educational component and giving an elective credit for that educational component under the certain requirements that are stipulated in this bill. Part of the bill explains the grade requirements that are that the student would have to do in order to get the grade for the class, and it stipulates several different things. It creates a club fair project expo where the students who participate in this program will not only present the fruits of their labor, but also present to other potential students why not only the club that they're in is beneficial to them, but also why the Club for Credit program is beneficial. And there are several different documents that are under the provision of the Department of Education to create for this program, which include written consent form, a syllabus or course description for this elective credit, and a monitor form to keep track of hours, and a certificate honoring the student's completion of the program. So yeah, this bill, it seeks to encourage students, two different types of students, I would say, Mr. Speaker. One, it will encourage the students who are already actively participating in clubs to further their club even further. I know a lot of times the work-school life balance is or work-school extracurricular balance for high school students is difficult, and this seeks to alleviate a little bit of that difficulty by giving students credit for the club that they're participating in, so long as they meet the educational components that are in this bill. And the second group of people who this bill is trying to help is those students who are going through high school not knowing what they want to do, and they see this bill, their first time they see the Club for Credit program, they would think, oh, this is an easy way for me to get an elective to help me either graduate sooner or to get a free period in their senior year. But what this bill seeks but by joining that club, not only will they be contributing to their school campus, contributing to these organizations, but they have and contributing to those organizations overall helps the student morale of the school. This also seeks to potentially, by joining the club, these students who may not have joined it earlier will find a passion or a hobby or a skill that they really enjoy, and that's something that they can pursue even after high school. So yeah, I know that this bill is kind of a long one, but the reason why it's long and is very detailed is in order to ensure that the bill is enforced in a way that is beneficial to in a way that is beneficial to the student. And yeah, I'm willing to answer any questions, Mr. Speaker, but ultimately I see this bill as helping the students on Guam who are already balancing a school work extracurricular life to ease a little bit of their burden for the positive role they're having on our youth and our schools and our community, while at the same time encouraging more of those students who aren't involved to get involved, and in that way discover their new passions or discover that they new interests that they can help to contribute to our community here on Guam. So if there are any other questions, I would like to point out that this bill uses 120 hours as the basis for a credit, and if anyone has a question of where the hours came from, this aligns with the Carnegie time requirement used by the department to monitor granting of credits. So yeah, this bill has been developed in a way to be compatible with the already existing requirements in order to get an elective credit. Yeah, this bill might be a little bit dense, but if anyone has any questions, I am free to answer any, but ultimately I hope that the body sees the benefit of this bill to our students of Guam, to help them find a passion, to our school community by boosting morale and involvement and finding passions and clubs and community in their clubs that they enjoy, but also the benefit that this bill, by participating in the clubs, can have on the overall community of Guam. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Santos. On the main motion, any other member wish to speak? Representative Felician and then Representative Lorenzo. Representative Felician, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to express my opinion on this bill. That's okay, right? I think this is kind of a double-edged sword, so to say, because I've had this incentive, or it used to be an incentive in the rock band program in Ukadu, the after-school rock band club, and you were able to get a credit for it at one point, but at the same time, people were joining it for the credit specifically and making the overall experience for the other members less than satisfactory, so to speak. Just meeting the specific requirements or the minimum requirements, doing a run-through or a performance, kind of half-butting it. And it was generally not a very pleasurable experience. And then they removed the credit, being able to get a credit from it, which then made people who actually wanted to be in the rock band program join without the credit incentive, and it made the overall club much more pleasurable, or not. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Representative Felician. Secretary Lorenzo, you're recognized on the main motion.
Sizos Masi, Mr. Speaker, I would just like to say that I am in full support of this bill. This bill was actually introduced last term also, and we had very good feedback from it. So Representative Santos decided to re-synergize and amend it to kind of give it up to date. But like Representative Santos had said, this Club for Credit Act will only enhance our island's education. It will entice and encourage our students to join these clubs, to join extracurricular activities, to have a community around them. They can join different clubs to see what works best for them, try out, test the waters. But I do ask that my colleagues support this bill. It's a good step to coming all together. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other member who wishes to be recognized on the main motion? Vice Speaker Richards.
Speaker Valencia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to express my support for this bill. I co-sponsored it back in the 31st, and I would like to thank the good author, Representative Javen Santos, and co-sponsor Representative Lorenzo for introducing this bill. I believe it's important that we recognize other learning environments and other places where our students our fellow peers are learning lifelong skills or things that may be valuable to the rest of, for the rest of their lives. But I just have one concern, and I would like to pose the question to the author, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Santos, do you yield? You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a concern with Section 5 of the bill regarding the grade requirements and rules. I'm not sure if everybody is aware, but I believe that the Guam Department of Education has moved into the standards-based grading, and I wanted to make sure that this bill was up to date with that particular mandate by GDOE. And I just wanted to pose to the author if Section 5 is in line with those mandates.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am aware of the fact that the standards-based grading has been implemented this semester, or this school year, but because of the fact that I don't believe that report cards are for this semester or for the school year are currently out for first quarter. But students can correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, I'm not 100% sure what the grades look like currently on the new system. If any of the current high school students would like to or would be able to answer that, it would help. But to my knowledge, I'm not sure about where the standards-based, or actually what the standards-based grading looks like when it comes to the final grade, because I do know that it's a scalar system, but I don't know whether that has an impact on the final grade that they get on their transcript. Yeah, if anyone is able to discuss that, I
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion for a recess.
Yes, I agree. Let's take a short recess. We're now back in session. Representative Valencia. Speaker Valencia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And then thank you to our colleagues where we, after our discussions during recess. And at this time, I'd like to make an amendment to Section 5 of the bill, Mr. Speaker.
You may continue.
Thank you. So the amendment would read, so it's Section 5 of the bill, page 4, lines 18 to 19. It will state, it will strike of no more than 100% to be replaced with as determined by the Guam Department of Education, comma, in line with current grading systems. So 18 to 19, lines 18 to 19 would read in total, a student may acquire a grade as determined by the Guam Department of Education in line with current grading systems, which shall be based on 3 parts. And then on line 20, to strike 60% shall be. And then on line 24, strike 20% shall be. And on page 5, line 3, 20% shall be, to strike that. Mr. Speaker, this amendment just provides a cushion just in case if this bill were to be enacted and GDOE still has implemented their standards-based grading system. This would provide an avenue for GDOE to determine the grading system and to determine the rules as to how this would be graded their own way, as in line with their own systems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Valencia. Would anyone like to speak on the Valencia amendment? Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. Speaker Valencia, please resume the chair.
On the main motion and the other member who wishes to speak, Representative Labang, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to bring everyone to section 4 of section 4 of the bill. Sorry. This bill came from my committee, and one thing that was not in the committee report, but it was brought up to me, was regarding service learning hours. So I already have spoke to the author of the bill, and I have one amendment to make. So on page 4, line 12, after the word act, period, I just want to add this clause, okay? No service learning hours may be obtained through the Club for Credit program, period.
Could you please repeat the amendment?
No service learning hours may be obtained through the Club for Credit program.
Would you like to speak on the amendment?
I just want to speak on this amendment because I feel that the hours that students gain for this program should be solely for this program, not for any other program that DOE has. Because remember, they're getting a grade credit for this. Can I make an amendment to my amendment? Sorry. It's just, I said I put may, right? Can it be changed to shall? Sorry.
On the amendment to the amendment, are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. So the amendment would read, page 4, line 12, after the word act, period, no service learning hours shall be obtained through the Club for Credit program.
Yes.
On the amendment, Representative LeBang.
So basically, that's my rationale why I added that clause, because I think if they're getting credit for this program, I think they should devote the hours they gain from that program only for this program, not for other programs as well. That's all.
On the LeBang amendment, any other member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, are there any objections to the LeBang amendment? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. Mr. Leader, you still have the floor.
I just want to continue on for the bill. Seeing this bill back again, I think is bring me a new hope that it would pass, because I feel that some school lacks elective and students are stuck in the verge of choosing an elective because that was only offered in their school. I think we need a diverse option for every student to choose which elective they should want to take. And if they join in such clubs like under the Club for Credit program, it's something that would enhance their passion to do better in our community, and hopefully if it would urge them to find their degree so when they come to college, they would not make a lot of major changes in life. And that's all, and I commend the author of the bill for bringing this back again to this hall with a great amendments through the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, Vice Speaker Richards, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to express my full support of the bill. I was there during the committee meeting for the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs, and we really tried to work it out. Representative Santos has been working on this since the 30th, I believe, and we saw it last term, and here it is again, and I just really want to see it pass and get to the legislature and become law, because I think it supports not the average academic student, but students who don't necessarily thrive in the classroom but are more hands-on kinds of people. You know, this allows them to get out there and learn, but also get credit for it in school. And I think it's a great opportunity for our youth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other member who wishes to be recognized on the main motion? If none, Representative Santos, you're invited to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I close, if it is okay with you, if it is to the agreement of the body, I would like to make an amendment to the sponsorship to include you, Speaker Valencia, Vice Speaker Richards, and Representative LeBang in the sponsorship.
On that amendment, are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In closing, I would like to thank everyone for their assistance with this bill throughout the process. I would like to thank Speaker Valencia for his acknowledgement of the new standards-based grading requirements and assisting us in developing this in a way that could be conducive to either the previous requirements or the standards-based requirements. I would like to recognize the concerns from other colleagues about the potential of students joining clubs merely for credit only and not really being participative. And this bill really attempted to structure the curriculum in a way that whether or not these students, or with the students being participating in the program, they will put in the hours, and they have assignments to do in order to get the grade, and they have to create this project at the end of the semester showcasing everything they did for the betterment of the club. So I thank my colleagues for those concerns, but I hope that I hope that the bill, through the language itself, seeks to improve on that program. And I would like to acknowledge the fact that at GW, many of the students who were in our school's band club and our school's band program joined the club and got the credit. It was an after-school program, so it worked very similarly to a club, but through the hours that they got through that program, many of those students in my class in the rock band or the concert band component have moved on to becoming either music majors at the University of Guam or musicians in various capacities. So I think that was a great example of people finding their passion through other alternatives. And I would like to thank Representative LeBang's point about the lack of diversity in the electives that can be offered in the school program, and this is to seek relief to some of the programs that might be filled by students who do not want to be there, or to seek relief for teachers seek relief to the Department of Education trying to fill elective requirements by bringing in and seeking to relieve their attempt of trying to find teachers for these electives, even though the electives might not be in demand, but they're a requirement to graduate. And with that being said, I thank all of the colleagues that came up to discuss, and I would like to move this bill to the third reading file for voting.
Thank you, Representative Santos. There's been a motion to place Bill number 28-32 onto the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are still in motions. Any other member who wishes to be recognized? Representative Kineni, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to place Bill 26-32 into the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 26-32 onto the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Kineni.
Thank you. In coordination with the expansion of the Natasha Protection Act, which we passed in this body, Bill 13-32, this bill, 26-32, is the Guam Vaping Product Tax of 2019. What this bill seeks to do is place a tax on vaping products, which includes both the the consumable liquid used for the inhalation of nicotine and other products, as well as the product that helps with the inhalation of dangerous chemicals. As policy innovators and as youth innovators here in the Youth Congress, we continue to look for ways to keep Guam's air clean and relatively smoke-free, while encouraging those who smoke or vape to discontinue due to the increased health risk. Taxing vaping products in the same way that we tax cigarettes and alcohol could lead to a deterrence in purchasing the products in the first place. Vaping, especially among the youth, is dangerous and could lead to a lifelong addiction to nicotine. The U.S. Surgeon General, Vice Admiral Jerome M. Adams, sent an advisory on December 2018 about the e-cigarette epidemic among the youth. In the advisory, it stressed that nicotine usage amongst adolescents stunts the brain development and leads to other respiratory problems. And as you can see from the news in the United States, there has been almost over 1,000 cases of severe respiratory illnesses, mostly commonly linked to those who have continued vaping. And when we get to the taxing, we won't be the first territory or the first place in the United States to enact this tax. There are over 20 states plus the District of Columbia which regulate vaping through tax levied. And this is meant to be a sin tax meant to reduce reduce the consumption, or at least, further push away the thought of using e-cigarettes, such as the same way that when we raise the tobacco stamp tax, that there's an immediate bump in the revenue we bring in to the government, and after that it shortly dries out because people are less interested in buying something that's expensive, especially if it's not good for their health. And what we see now with vaping is that it's the new generational cigarettes. These companies are getting the youth hooked on nicotine in a different way, in a different way. The flavors, the products that they promote, and the way they go about marketing these products has been attracting the youth, and there is no more denying it, especially with the current case with the Juul company in the United States. They have been sued for initially progressing this epidemic among the youth. So as the youth of Guam now, and we've all seen it around us, we've seen, whether you've encountered cigarettes or you've encountered vaping, you've seen the harmful effects it has on the people and the health risk it brings. Vaping is not harmless. It ingests chemicals into your lungs, and with these severe cases of respiratory illnesses, most of these doctors said that the lungs look like they have been chemically burned. It is not water vapor entering into the lungs. This is an aerosol of heavy metals, nicotine, and other harmful products that are not meant to be situated in the lungs. So with this is one of the few steps we can take as we continue to move towards a cleaner air, as we move towards a healthier Guam, a cleaner air Guam. This is not the final step I would like to take with cigarettes, however, with e-cigarettes, however. I would like to take a further step in banning flavored products here on the island, but that's something that maybe needs to be discussed a little bit further, and something that could probably be done with executive action rather than legislative work. But at least on the ballpoint of this, we should at least consider taxing these products, syntaxing these products, so that people are deterred from using them, one, and that we allow the government to at least bring in some kind of revenue. Because states that tax vaping products have reportedly brought in, these are big states, so they're not comparable, but Minnesota brought in $5.6 million in 2018, and they're estimated to bring in about $600 million with tobacco and e-cigarette taxes combined. That's a massive amount of money. You can only imagine the amount of money, supplemental money that could bring in for Guam if we tax these products now, which are not really regulated or taxed here on the island. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kaneni. Would anyone like to speak? Representative Santos, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill, for the record, was originally assigned to the Committee on Taxation and General Government Operations, and we placed it on the session agenda through pulling it out of the Committee on Taxation, General Government Operations to discuss it in the Committee on Rules. That being said, during the Committee on Rules meeting, I expressed to to the good sponsor my apprehension in regards to the definitions of the bill, and my concern through the bill overall is that the definitions of this bill, in discussion with the sponsor, he had stated that he wanted this bill to be broad scoping to address the many different types of products in this bill, such as whether it's regular vapes or Juuls or pods or whatever the new technology is in regards to vapor products. However, my apprehension with this bill is that without legal definitions defined in this bill, some of these definitions might be, or some of these terms that have been used undefined in the rule can be interpreted in a way that can go towards the I guess, unenforceability of this bill. For example, there are many types of products that are consumed through vapor, and without this being defined, several things such as asthma medicine and several things such as dehumidifiers, these things that are medicinal in use, can be construed as being a part of this tax. And even the idea of the word unit when taxing vapor product units, I assume, because the units that allow for inhalation of consumable vaping product, I worry that without a definitions, this bill becomes less clear. But overall, I completely support the bill in regards to its intent to the taxing of vaping products, because I do think that this, by taxing the product, we not only attempt to try to prevent the use of vaping, but we also create important revenue for a variety of services that are listed in the tax proceeds section of the bill. And I thank my good colleague for the 10% of the monies collected under tax levied by this chapter shall be deposited in the public transit fund. I thank him because I think that's an important aspect that helps to that will not only help to benefit the rest of the island, but my apprehension is the language of this bill and the lacking of a definition section of this bill. But in terms of the idea of taxing vape products and the use of the revenue to support many great services such as educational facilities and the Healthy Futures Fund and public transit, I thank the good colleague for writing this bill. I just hope that this bill, I don't know how I would vote about this bill at this moment yet, because there is a lot of things that are left undefined, and I don't know what the repercussions could be. And I do see that without clear and concise language, there might be several legal troubles that come with the enforcement of this bill. But I support the taxing of the vaping products, and I do support the proceeds of the funding that would be collected from the tax. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Santos. Would anyone else like to speak on the bill? Representative LeBang.
Mr. Speaker, I just want to try to make this amendment. On Section 3, on Section 6A102, an excise tax is levied on a vapor products at the rate of 5 cents. My first amendment is to change it to 10 cents.
Please repeat your amendment, I'm sorry.
Okay, so on the part where it says tax on vapor products, an excise tax is levied on vapor products at the rate of 5 cents, changing it to 10 cents.
10 cents. Would you like to speak further on the amendment?
I just want to do this amendment because I feel 5 cents is not enough. But if we can get a defined fiscal note for this bill, I think it will be better. But I feel confident that if we put it at 10 cents, we can get more revenue. And the goal of the bill is to deter people from vaping. And if they know that vape products are expensive, then hopefully the people would consider vaping before they buy it.
Thank you, Representative Labang. On the Labang amendment, any member who wishes to be recognized? There are none. Are there any objections to the Labang amendment? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. You may continue, Mr. Leader.
I also want to further amend the dollar per unit, changing it to $2 per unit.
In the same section.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. On the Labang amendment, any member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, are there any objections? Amendment passes. You still have the floor, Mr. Leader. If you have anything further.
Oh, sorry. So I agree with the point of the retiring speaker that it needs definition, and hopefully moving forward, if it passes through here, the legislature can add more teeth to this bill. And moving forward, I think so far focusing on the revenue that it will generate, I think we should pass this bill.
Thank you, Representative Labang. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, Representative Kineni, you're invited to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to touch on what both former Speaker Santos and Majority Leader Labang touched on. At least it was the tax proceeds part of the bill, because I guess I didn't explain that part a little clearly. So all monies collected under this tax in this chapter shall be distributed to the following special revenue funds. 25% is supposed to go to the Territorial Educational Facility Funds. And that fund is to restore and renovate the schools on Guam, including UOG and GCC. 25 of this tax shall be deposited into the Healthy Futures Fund, which goes to projects and other positions that help, which goes to projects and some government positions that help with the health impact on Guam. The 25% there's also a 25% that goes to the Youth Tobacco Education and Prevention Fund. And this part to me is the biggest part of this, the biggest part of where this money is going, because that 25% then goes over to the cessation of using tobacco and e-cigarette products also. 15% of the monies collected under this tax shall be deposited into the Police Services Fund, so that the men and women in GPD are also well equipped to handle, handing out citations and other issues that may arise with this new tax, and hopefully with further enforcement of this issue. And then the 10% to the Public Transit Fund, which was generously suggested to me by both the former Speaker and Majority Leader. So with this bill, I understand that it may look like the definitions are unclear, but if you read through the first section, if you read through Section A, it's an excise tax is levied on vapor products at a rate of, 10 cents per milliliter of consumable product, and at a rate of $2 per unit that allows for the inhalation of consumable vaping product. Now, I guess the first part I agree with, that the consumable product needs a little bit more definition. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a motion to place Bill 26-32 back to the Committee on Taxation and General Government Operations.
There's been a motion to refer Bill number 26-32 back to the Committee on Taxation and General Government Operations. Is that as is with the amendments, Representative Kineni?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, as is with the amendments.
Okay. There's been a motion to refer Bill 26-32 back to committee as amended. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're now on back to motions. Any other member wish to be recognized? Majority Leader Labang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the sponsor, I want to move Resolution 26-32 to the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 26-32 onto the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Mr. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I want to send regrets that Representative Isabel Valencia was not able to come today because she's taking her SAT, as well as Representative Vicente Blas-Taran. But they really want to come today, but in light of that, they sent me their testimonies. So, October is an anti-bullying awareness month. One of the reasons that Representative Isabel Valencia sponsored this resolution. Her action to alarming rates of bullying was alarming, and she was very unaware and thought that maybe years of participation in anti-bullying awareness activities had reduced the rates. Sadly, bullying continues to be prevalent, being in the generation of frequent social media makes it easier to hide behind the screen and degrade others. I hope that this resolution will make many speak up and be aware. I also have testimony from Representative Jewel Maige, and she sent this in celebration of National Bullying Prevention Month. The sponsor present resolution 26-32 to the body. Within this resolution, we have voiced gratitude to those who have stepped up and taken the issues of bullying head on. We are thankful to those who have done it in our power to stop bullying and cyberbullying around us. With this, I hope that my colleagues share the same sentiment by passing Resolution 26-32. CDUS Maasi, and thank you. That's from Representative Jubal Maige. I just want to continue upon that. I want to give the story behind this resolution. So Representative Vicente Blas-Taran reached out to me a few months ago talking about declaring October as Anti-Bullying Awareness Month. And with me as being the majority leader, I said, go for it. And I told him to start a group of high school students in the Guam Youth Congress to sponsor this bill. And with that being said, during the Committee on Rules meeting, I know you, Speaker, and some representatives voiced their concern that we did not ask you guys to sponsor this resolution. With that being said, I make a motion to add all representatives that's not listed as co-sponsor that's present today as co-sponsors.
On the amendment to add all representatives present here who are not co-sponsors of the resolution as co-sponsors of the resolution, are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You still have the floor, Mr. Leader, or is that all? Okay. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to be recognized? Seeing as there are none, is there a motion, Mr. Leader?
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Resolution 26-32 to the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 26-32 onto the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I request for a brief recess.
We are in recess. 32nd Guam Youth Congress is back in session. Mr. Leader, I believe
Mr.
you're
Speaker,
recognized.
I move to amend the session agenda to add Resolution 27-32. It's relative to removing representatives of Guam Youth Congress who are deemed unqualified due to inactivity and failure to comply to legislative minimum requirement as stated in the standing rules of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress.
There's been a motion by Majority Leader Labang to amend the session agenda to place resolution number 27-32 into the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Resolution 27 to the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 27-32 into the second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out that Representative Duenas of the District of George Washington High School and Representative Pierre Paul of Guam Community College has missed more than 3 sessions and has not introduced any legislation at all. So with that being said, I move with this resolution to deem them removed from Guam Youth Congress.
Thank you, Representative Labang. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Seeing as there are none, Representative Labang, I believe there's a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Resolution 27-32 to the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 27-32 into the third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. I believe we've exhausted all items on our session agenda, or am I wrong, Representative Labang?
Mr. Speaker, I move that second roll call reflect first roll. Can we do second roll call? Sorry.
Are you withdrawing your motion?
Yes.
Okay. We've exhausted all items in our second reading file, and we're now on the second roll call. Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia, Representative Dinsman, Representative Duenas, Representative Felicen, Representative Garrido, Representative Labang, Representative Lorenzo, Representative Maige, Representative Matanani, Representative Pareda, Representative Pierre Paul, Representative Kineni, Representative Quintanilla, Representative Richards, Representative Elijah Santos, Representative Javen Santos, Representative Tyron, Representative Trinidad, Representative Christian Valencia, Representative Isabel Valencia. Mr. Speaker, a quorum remains.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're now on item 18, consideration of the daily file. And we'll first start with bill number 27-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion before we
You are
proceed.
recognized. What's the motion?
I'm sorry.
What's the motion?
I just want to excuse members not present today.
There's been a motion to excuse members not present today. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
I also want a motion to waive engrossments of bill and resolutions.
There's been a motion to waive the engrossment for all bills and resolutions discussed today. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Bill number 27-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Bill number 27-32, introduced by Representative Javen Santos, an act to amend sub-article 4 of Article 5 of Chapter 61, Title 21 Guam Code Annotated, relative to building better communities on Guam by ending mandatory minimum parking requirements. As amended on the floor.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, pass. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, pass. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, aye. Representative LeBang. Representative LeBang, pass. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Matanani. Representative Matanani, aye. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, pass. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, pass. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, pass. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, aye. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, pass. Representative LeBang. Representative LeBang, aye. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, pass. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, pass. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, nay. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, nay. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, nay.
Bill number 27-32 as amended on the floor received 9 ayes, 3 nays, and 8 excused absences. Bill number 27-32 hereby passes. We're now on bill number 28-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Bill number 28-32, introduced by Representative Javen Santos and Representative Stephanie Lorenzo. Bill number 28-32 as amended on the floor. An act to add new sections 4126 through 4132 to Chapter 4, Division 2, Title 17, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the establishment of the Club for Credit program under the Guam Department of Education, and to cite this act as the Club for Credit Program Act of 2019.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, pass. Representative LeBang. Representative LeBang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Matanani. Representative Matanani, aye. Representative Pareda. Say pass. Representative Pareda, pass. Representative Kineni. Representative Kineni, pass. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Richards. Representative Richards, aye. Representative Javen Santos. Representative Javen Santos, aye. Representative Valencia, Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, nay. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, pass. Representative Kaneni. Representative Kaneni, pass. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, nay. Representative Kaneni. Representative Kaneni, nay.
Bill number 28-32 as amended on the floor. As amended by the committee and further amended on the floor, received 9 ayes, 3 nays, and 8 excused absences. Bill number 28-32 hereby passes. Moving on to Bill number Resolution number 26-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Resolution number 26-32, introduced by Representatives Isabel Valencia, Vicente Blas Tyron, Al Labang, Stephanie Lorenzo, all members. Relative to recognizing the month of October 2019 as Anti-Bullying Awareness Month and calling for unity, peace, and acceptance within our school, and for condemning bullying and all other forms of violence that occurs in the island.
Vice Speaker Richards, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion to vote by show of hands for Resolution 2632.
There's been a motion to vote by show of hands for resolution number 26-32. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. All those in favor of resolution number 26-32, please raise your hand. Resolution 26-32 received unanimous support and hereby passes. We're now on resolution number 27-32. Mr. Secretary, please read the title.
Resolution number 27-32, introduced by Representative Labang, Representative Lorenzo, relative to removing representatives of the Guam Youth Congress who are deemed unqualified due to inactivity and failure to comply to the legislative minimum requirement as stated in the standing rules of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress.
Representative Kineni, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to have Resolution 27-32 by a show of hands.
There's been a motion that we vote by show of hands for resolution number 27-32. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. All those in favor of resolution number 27-32, please raise your hand. Resolution 27-32 received unanimous support and hereby passes. We've now exhausted all items in our voting file and now move on to item 19, brief extension of remarks. Any member who wishes to be recognized? Is there none? We'll move on to item 20, announcements. Any announcements? Well, I have one. Special election for the Guam Youth Congress will be held as prescribed by law on October 21st, 2019, the third Monday in October. Please be on the lookout. Vice Speaker Richards, you're recognized.
The University of Guam's Laddie Tones and Mingilao Hot Jazz are having a concert next week, Friday and Saturday, October 11th and 12th at 7 p.m. You can buy tickets from me. Students and seniors are $3 and general admission is $5.
Do I hear a motion for a sample? No? Okay. Any other announcements? If there are none, Mr. Leader, I believe there's a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move to adjourn this session subject to the call of the Speaker.
There's been a motion to adjourn this session subject to the call of the Speaker. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We are adjourned.